Welcome to another episode of Motivating Monday. And today's theme is on motivating or encouraging verses. I have picked Matthew 6:34 as my verse, and it reads, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." The context surrounding this verse is that Jesus was giving his famous Sermon on the Mount, and is in chapter 6 where we can see him highlighting the importance of first being pleasing to God, and that people are to be good in order to please God and not to please men. Just before he mentions the verse that I've selected, he also talks about how men cannot serve both God and mammon, or in other words, money. When the people were listening to him heard this, I imagine they must have felt a bit anxious. Is it wrong to pursue money? Can I not be wealthy? Can I not want to live a comfortable life with money? This is when Jesus starts talking about not worrying. Starting from verse 25 all the way down to my selected verse 34, he talks about how men do not need to worry about their daily necessities, that if even the birds and the grass have their needs fulfilled, what more us? Jesus knows that after his sermon on not serving anything but God, that people start worrying about their finances, and that the temptation to go after riches at all costs is strong. I mean, who doesn't want to become rich, right? And he knows this about the many worries we have in life, as he himself came in the form of man, and it has gone through all our experiences and has been through the same temptations that we have gone through, as mentioned in Hebrews 4:15. And I think it is this part that makes this verse particularly motivating, that Jesus himself, with all the same sufferings as man, or even more, one might say, he knew his crucifixion was approaching, and yet he was able to say, "Do not worry about tomorrow." And indeed, God does have a plan for all of us. Jesus' point here is very clear. We do not need to worry about what comes after, because God always has a plan. Just as God had a plan for Jesus to sacrifice himself for all of us, it is the same for us, that throughout whatever sufferings we have, God always has a plan for us in mind. And it is exactly why we do not need to worry. And Jesus makes it really clear. It's not like worrying can do anything to save us from that current predicament, as he mentions in verse 27. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. We only need to care about what is happening in the present. Now, that does not mean that we totally disregard the idea of preparing for something. It is definitely not true that we do absolutely zero planning because we do not have to worry. I mean, we are expected to be prepared for many things, such as Judgment Day. But preparing is not the same as worrying or excessive worrying. In fact, preparing is not the same at all. It's something done to combat worrying, something you do to make sure that you don't worry as much. There are many cases of people breaking down, like you can see in the real world. There are many cases of people breaking down because they worry too much. They fall into depression and so on. Jesus tells us not to worry because worrying can break us and turn us into a state even worse than whatever we were before, and even worse than the trouble that we were facing that caused us to worry in the first place. And so, for me, when I face adversities that seem daunting at first, I remember this verse, and instead of excessively worrying, I turn to God. I pray to Him. Pray to Him for guidance, wisdom, whatever it may be, as I know that God is in full control, and that whatever it may be, He always has a plan. That's all for today's episode, and I hope you have also been motivated or encouraged by the same verse, just as I am. Thank you. Holy and holy.